Hey everybody, welcome back to Choosers of the Slain. We are looking at episode 6, and today we are talking about Sisters of Battle. Now, I personally know pretty much nothing about Sisters of Battle beyond the little bit that I've been told or that I've read over the years, and the little bit Luke and I have talked about it since the codex came out. What with the quarantine going on and everything, we haven't gotten to get in as many games as we'd like. But Luke has gotten, from what I understand, pretty handy with his sister's army.
I do all right.
Has sent some interesting thoughts my way and some interesting lists my way. So we thought maybe we'd talk about what he's seeing in the sisters groups that he's a part of, as well as some of the maybe questions I have, and just looking for a breakdown of what's going on here. So before I get into any questions here, you wanna just give me a little blurb on your high level thoughts?
So for me personally, I just started actively playing Sisters since the relaunch here with all the plastic models in November. I've toyed with the army over the years. It's been one that I've wanted to collect, so I've bought every set of rules. I bought the Witch Hunter Codex. I've consumed everything Sisters, short of playing them until this new re-release of the line. And I have to say, the wait has been worth it. As a I don't have the pain of a Sisters player who's like been their primary collection the entire time. But being somebody who has been waiting for plastics to dive in, God, it has been so worth it. And I would have to say my favorite thing about them is I've played almost every faction in this game. I think the only factions I have not played are Death Guard and high-level Astra Militarum over the years. I've probably touched on in Tau. I have not played Tau myself. Over the years, I've tried everything, and this army possibly is the most characterful and yet still tactically viable. I think that is my highest elevator pitch level commentary I can make about the Sisters Codex is, while you are playing a competitive, really thoughtful game, you feel like you're playing a narrative game. They did a very good job of capturing the feel of the Sisters in the Sisters mechanics.
Okay, that's good though. That's really good to hear.
I think it's amazing. As far as like tactically how they play, if you are familiar with how the Gene Stealer cult is a very high learning curve, kind of high risk, high reward army, where if you want to play Gene Stealers well, or Gene Stealer cults well, you have to put the time in to like really plan your synergies and really learn how to win a game in deployment.
Sure.
That kind of stuff. Sisters are a slightly more forgiving version of that. They're that same kind of synergistic thinking glass cannon, but they happen to also be wearing power armor. So it's a little bit more forgiving than it is with the Gene Stealer cult. You have you feel like you have a greater number of higher quality models that are more defended. However, you are still toughness 3.
Yeah.
You are still a mid to close range army, and you still have layers and layers of synergy and things to remember. So it is definitely, to play them competitively is definitely a mental exercise. But personally, I think it's very rewarding when in any given phase of the game, you can make your opponent forget they're playing Sisters and start thinking, oh, I'm playing Space Marines. Wait, no, I'm playing against Orcs. Wait, no, I'm playing against Eldar. Wait, no, I'm playing against Chaos. Because the things that you can do as you shift and adapt to the miracle dice that you earn, or to the various stratagems or synergies that you have available to you, as you make those adjustments and adapt to what's going on in the game, the flavor of what your opponent is receiving from you can change wildly. And I think that's one of their benefits.
Okay. Yeah. So would you say with that kind of versatility, do you see that being the army is versatile on the tabletop, or do you see that being something that boils all the way down into the list build as well?
I think it is both.
Okay.
I think one leads to the other.
Sure.
So what you'll see is the versatility in the list build lets you really go, what kind of game do I want to play? And then once you decide the kind of game of 40K you want to participate in, you may have less options on the battlefield that vary from that, because the army is very kind of customizable to the role. Once you've locked in, okay, this is how my army is going to go, you've layered enough synergy on top of each other that you're kind of, that's the direction you're going. But because they are functionally, and I say this knowing that some people are going to use this to fuel their dislike of facing the sisters, as the only army that can legally cheat in the game,
Right.
The times that you do have to lean out of your chosen trench, you have mechanics that kind of cover your butt while you're doing it.
Yeah.
So you build an army that focuses on being a gun line, or you build an army that focuses on close combat. But when you have to vary from what you planned, you have mechanics that are providing like a safety net.
Yeah. You're speaking of Miracle Die, right?
For a large part, yes.
Okay.
So Miracle Dice, which are the products of Acts of Faith, I'll go very briefly into what that is.
Yeah, sounds good.
But at the beginning of every battle round, you generate a Miracle Die. Certain warlord traits and characters generate extra Miracle Dice, and in any given phase of the game, you have a checklist. And if any one or more of those things happen, you earn a single Miracle Die in that phase. And those Miracle Dice, what they are is you pre-roll a die and then set it aside in your Miracle Dice pool, and it sits there floating until you decide to use it. And there's a list of 7 or 9 abilities, hit rolls, wound rolls, damage rolls, armor saves, advance rolls, charge rolls, deny the witch attempts, and morale checks. Those are the types of things you can use the Miracle Dice on. So when the game calls for you to roll dice, instead of rolling, you can pick a Miracle Die up as an act of faith from your miracle pool and just place it down, and it is that result as an unmodified roll. So if you have a rule that triggers on an unmodified 6, if you choose a Miracle Die showing a 6, you rolled an unmodified 6. But you have to make that decision before you roll. So then have that chess-like looking into the future of, I really want to hit with this weapon, but if it damages, it does d6 damage, and I'm sitting here holding a 5 in my Miracle Dice. Do I want to chance my 3-up ballistic skill to guarantee 5 damage? Or am I willing to take random damage because I want to guarantee that I hit?
Right,
and so
right.
there is that. You have to almost read the room at any given moment. But it allows you to kind of see the future, because you roll these Miracle Dice as you earn them, and you know what they are, and they don't go away unless you use them. They sit there the whole game. Also, you don't just use them in that fashion. There are several stratagems that allow you to use Miracle Dice. They convert into a +1 modifier to a roll you've already made. Or if a character dies, the Emperor can bring them back to life with divine intervention, and the number of Miracle Dice you spend is how many wounds they return to the battlefield with. So the Miracle Dice are not only a way to kind of portent the future as far as the random number generator, they're also in a way kind of like magic points that work alongside your command points to produce these miraculous effects in the game. And it really captures that. How do these women hang with Space Marines and Custodes in the fluff when they're just the stat line of a guardsman wearing power armor? Well, right. it's because of their faith in the Emperor is so unshakable that they literally can do the impossible. And Games Workshop did a very good job of creating what I feel is a balanced mechanic that lets you in the game feel like that, especially when somebody just barely tags your tank with a las cannon, and they're so proud, like, oh, I'm going to take down your exorcist, it's only got 3 wounds left, and you're like, nah, I make the invuln save. Well, how do you make the invuln save? Well, I have a miracle 6 and it's a 6+ invuln on my exorcist, so no, it doesn't wound me because I believe.
Yeah. So that's another thing with the army too, is pretty much everything, at least all the sisters themselves and their units have a 6+ invuln save, right?
That is correct. The Shield of Faith special rule allows every sister in the army, and by every sister, I mean anything that has the Adepta Sororitas keyword and the Shield of Faith special ability, which is almost all of them.
Yeah.
It allows them to deny the witch with 1d6 instead of 2d6, and it also provides them a 6+ invuln save, just all the time. And there are ways that you can use warlord traits and other circumstances to increase that invuln save for maybe one use, or while they're within a certain aura, or under the effects of a certain ability. So you can get your infantry down to like a 4+ invuln pretty reliably within a large footprint on the table, if you bring the right characters and you layer the right things across each other. And it's super handy to have these toughness 3 power armor wearing models walking across the table. Then your opponent's like, okay, well, I'm just going to hit them with a bunch of heavy AP weaponry to punch through that power armor. It's going to be easy to wound them because they're toughness 3. And you're like, well, but she's got a 4+ invuln save from this, and this. So
sure.
Okay. And one of our chapters, they're called orders, but one of our chapter tactic style abilities, order convictions, is to ignore AP1 and treat it as AP0. And then there's a character that can project a 6-inch aura that does the same thing, and they stack. So if you have sisters from that order in the aura of the Imagifier who is singing the tale of the Stoic, you now have a sister with the 3+ armor save who's ignoring AP1 and AP2 as if it's AP0. And with other characters, you can also give her a 4+ invuln save. And she's infantry, so she can easily get cover, which makes her armor save a 2+. So you have this army where the opponent thinks that you're as easy to kill as a Tau Fire Warrior, or an Eldar Guardian, or whatever, because of your toughness 3 1 wound stat line. All I got to do is punch through your 3+ armor save, which, as the meta has shown us, without special rules to make them stronger, the 3+ armor save has never saved Space Marines. What saves Space Marines is all their other abilities. So you look at the sisters and go, okay, it's just as easy to kill you as it would be a Marine, and you have a lower toughness. But there's all these surprises up their sleeve.
Right.
And it's very fun to watch somebody's jaw just hit the table because, wait, you took how many wounds? I did like 17 unallocated wounds, and you took what, 1 damage? Like, how did that work? Obviously dice rolls are dice rolls, but it's always fun to watch somebody just be flabbergasted by what they can weather.
Kind of brings a lot of tricks to the Imperial faction.
Yes.
Whereas prior to that, it was, most Imperial armies tend to be fairly straightforward in what their abilities are. Sounds like sisters have a lot more kind of tricks up their sleeves.
Yeah. I often, when I'm describing things, will kind of create, if you imagine a chart that's like a triangle shape, and each point of the triangle is a known quantity. And then where does this fall on that? Where is it on the slider between these things? If you were to take a Marine, a Marine army, a Guard army, or an Astra Militarum army, and a Tau army as the 3 points of the triangle, the sisters are the center of that triangle. They have like abilities that feel like Guard orders, and they have the level of characters that the Imperial Guard would use. So like for every couple troop squads, you basically have a character. I think in a 2,000 point list, I'm running like 7 to 9 characters.
Oh, wow.
And so you have these buffing characters, these support characters running around in every little cluster of your army, providing all these effects. So it feels kind of like a Guard army, but their abilities overlap and support each other like a Tau army, using marker lights and stratagems and like Cao Yan and Montka and all those things. But you're doing it with Space Marine equipment.
I could definitely see why that would be an attractive, kind of an attractive play style.
It's very fun in the mid to short range game.
Yeah, and the tactical flexibility helps a lot too.
It does.
That seems like a good draw for them as well. So, I guess kind of along that line, since we're talking about equipment and all that, do you have like a top unit or a top 2 units or something like that?
I definitely. Oh, well, go ahead. Finish your question.
I guess, do you have any must-have units where whenever you build a list, you're going, yeah, I need at least one of these?
So for sure. Yeah, I am a huge fan of the Sisters Repentia. And I think right now, unless a Sisters player is opposed to them for narrative reasons or for just I don't know, I guess being a hipster about, that what's cool right now, I'm not going to use it. The Repentia are probably, if not the best unit in the codex. They're very, very good.
Okay.
And depending on what order you run, if you stick to Bloody Rose or Order of Our Martyred Lady, which are the ones that I think the Repentia benefit the most from, they can really run away with a ridiculous amount of effectiveness for a 13-point model. They come in units of 4 to 9, so you can have, if you max out the rule of 3, you can have 27 of them in your army, and they literally cost 13 points each. And with the right support characters, stratagems, and like movement and smart play style and placement, I have killed an Imperial Knight in close combat with 3 of them.
Oh my goodness.
And it's a really solid close combat unit. And it seems very fragile. It's set up to look like a glass cannon. But again, if you place characters nearby that increase their invuln save, you can very easily get these 13-point models to a 4+ invuln save with a 5+ feel no pain. And then they can charge into combat. I'm not going to go into the 8 parts of the equation, but
sure,
you're basically hitting on 3s and re-rolling your misses with a weapon that you can get to strength 8, and with a 1 command point stratagem, get a +1 on your wound roll, so you can even wound Imperial Knights on a 3. And in the hands of Bloody Rose Repentia specifically, the AP of that sword is 4. And so if your target lacks an invuln save, they're probably not saving at all.
Right.
And the weapon does a fixed 2 damage. So.
And is Bloody Rose the one that gives them an extra attack too?
Yes, Bloody Rose is +1 attack when you are charged, charge, or heroically intervene.
Okay.
It also. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's like Space Marine Shock Assault.
Yeah, that it is worded exactly the same as Shock Assault.
Gotcha.
And then they also get an additional AP on all pistols and melee weapons. And so even the Seraphim that are deep striking from the sky, and there's a 1 command point stratagem that lets them fire at the end of the movement phase after they deep strike.
Yeah.
In the Bloody Rose order, all of those bolt pistols are now strength 4 AP -1 damage, which adds up quick when you have a ballistic skill of 3.
Yeah.
So it is. While I tend to favor Bloody Rose because I'm an ex-Orc player and an ex-Space Wolf player and a Custodes player, I tend to, my, I guess, tactical expertise or competitive play style or whatever lends itself well to all of the mastery of the charge phase and how you move in an assault and how you position things and how you use pylons. I have familiarity in that area. So Bloody Rose speaks to me. Because it's like getting to play a characterful, effective army in a way that I'm already used to playing, and that's been really nice. But Our Martyred Lady is another excellent way to use the close combat aspects, because Our Martyred Lady receives +1s for the rest of the battle to certain roles when a sister from that unit dies because she's been martyred. Even if you use a hospitaler later to return that sister to life,
right,
once a unit has experienced losing a model, the unit permanently gets that buff. And so that really feeds into the math of how effective some of the sisters units can be if you really build for it, and if you do those tactical gambits where you stick your neck out slightly so that your opponent feels like they have to tag the unit to push it back or to punish it for making a mistake. And really all they did was just play into your hands. You killed 2 sisters out of that unit. Okay, I'll return 1 or 2 of them to life over the next turn or 2. And now they fight you better.
Right.
So there's a lot of that type of thought that has to go into the sisters list for it to be competitively effective. That, looking at, you don't just sit down and go, my favorite unit is the penitent engine because it looks cool. So I'm just going to bring a bajillion of those.
Right.
You can do that, and it's fun. And the codex is solid enough that in not super competitive games, that could still be fun and you could still win.
Mm-hmm.
But to really hold their own in the current meta against, your Iron Hands or, some of the kind of jankier Eldar lists, or, when you get into that really tooth and claw level of competitive play, there is a lot of arcane study that goes into, okay, when I do this, then I'll do this, and then I use this. And if I'm tired or not focused when I play with the sisters, there is invariably a moment in the middle or end of turn 1 or 2 where I want to just start swearing because I forgot one thing.
Yep.
Where okay, for everything to go according to plan, I have to do these 12 things in order. And then I forget number 7 and I don't realize it until number 11.
Not a fun feeling.
It's not a fun feeling. And I don't say that, meaning to discourage the army for anybody, because it's a solid enough army that you can just go, Battle Sisters are cool, Exorcists look rad, I'm just going to make a gun line and have a good time, because it is a really characterful army and it's a solid codex.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to eke every ounce of venom out of it, you are I quite often burn through 6 to 9 command points on turn 1.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, unless I am just straight up outplayed, everybody has a bad dice roll game, whatever. But some players I've bounced off from, like they were made out of adamantium because they just knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I've had my units trade up like 3 to 4 times their value in points before they die.
Nice.
On that first turn, there are plenty of ways you can get Repentia in a first turn charge.
Mm-hmm.
Exorcist, which is the other unit I didn't really bring up earlier. Exorcist, by the math, absolute auto include. Me personally, my Exorcists are they must have a problem with me because they don't perform the way that they do for everyone else on Earth.
Right.
But the Exorcist is a solid tank. It is to be able to put out a 48-inch range weapon that's strength 8, AP -3, D6 damage, that shoots 3D 3 times.
Yeah.
In an army with a 3-up ballistic skill where it only costs you 45 points to put down a character that gives them reroll 1s.
Ugh.
Plus, that tank is toughness 8, has 12 wounds, has a 6-up invuln save, and if you make it part of the order that ignores AP, that applies to the vehicles too. So now this tank is ignoring AP -1, and with a 45-point flag holding character is also ignoring AP -2.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And the sisters, we don't pay anything more for hunter killer missiles. They cost, at least right now in the current meta, they cost 6 points like they do for every other Imperial army.
Yep.
But we get miracle dice. So when I spend 6 points on a hunter killer missile, I don't have to fire it till I know it's going to hit.
Yeah.
That makes that 6 points is worth so much more.
Oh yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
it's not a gamble.
No.
So and that is one thing to keep in mind. It's really easy to talk about the hunter killer missile as a waste of points because it always misses. The sisters only have a handful of ways to reach out past 36 inches, and the hunter killer missile is one of them.
Right.
So that's something that to keep in mind for the sisters, that's a viable upgrade. Whereas in other armies, it's kind of I had 6 points left, so I bought a hunter killer missile.
Yeah.
Whereas for us, it's like put one on every Exorcist because it's gonna hit.
Right. Yeah. When you have the ability to say, yeah, it's going to hit, all of a sudden that 6 points doesn't seem like much.
And I would never put it on a Rhino or an Immolator personally, because those are toughness 7 like regular Rhinos are. And so while you're waiting to have a miracle die free to use it for the hunter killer missile, you might lose it because it's on a Rhino.
Right.
But that Exorcist being toughness 8, put it where it's going to live longer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I mean, I know I'm kind of jumping all over the board with that stuff, but yeah, man, Repentia are great for close combat. Exorcists are great for long range anti-tank or anti-elite infantry fire. We have like a lot of codexes, we have some units that are there for tradition and are maybe not that terribly tactically useful. I'm looking at Death Cult Assassins, Crusaders, things that are wonderful, fun models and awesome in concept. And I have tons of them because I wanted them to be great, but they're just not as cost effective as some other things.
Sure.
But even those are still fun and useful if you're playing like a all comers kind of game. They're good enough that they're worth taking in those. And I myself am still trying to cook up ways to use them in a competitive setting. It's a good, solid book. It's got a lot of variety, a lot of interesting units. The models look amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm not a pro tier ITC tournament champion player, but based on my personal experience and a lot of the research I've read, and I curate a competitive sisters group on Facebook, and I'm a member of the other two big sisters groups that are more hobby focused. I really feel like the sisters are solidly like a B+ A- tier codex in the current meta. And so as people get more experience with how to play it, and as people try out new ideas, or when somebody cracks that code, I think we're going to see a lot come out of the codex. So if somebody out there has been sleeping on them as like, man, they're really cool, but I don't know if I want to jump into that. Like, it's pretty great. It's a fun army. The models look amazing. It's fun to play them. I really enjoy them.
Nice. Well, that's fantastic to hear. I know you were really looking forward to them, so I'm glad to hear that you're getting a lot of enjoyment out of them, and I hope that a lot of the sisters players out there that have been waiting all these long years to finally get some plastic models are happy with what they've gotten, both rules wise and model wise. I think pretty much all the new models are absolutely gorgeous. Games Workshop did such a great job of keeping that kind of Baroque, ornate feel, while still giving the army kind of this a certain amount of femininity laced with menace, without going overboard like a lot of companies do, where it's like, these are obviously women because they're wearing no clothes. I feel like Games Workshop really balanced all that very well in their designs. I absolutely would agree.
Yeah, that I agree with that completely. Something else from a model design standpoint that I think is worth mentioning. One of my local guys here is just getting back into 40K after a break, and he is struggling because he'll play against my sisters. And he looks at how Miracle Dice work, and he's just like, man, his army's just broken. And a lot of that is just from him. He's easing into things. He's still getting used to 8th edition. But something, because the army has the tendency to create that feeling because of, I can pre-roll dice and use them when I feel like it, and that kind of stuff. There is something in the art design that I think is worth mentioning.
Okay.
Everything is super tall and really wide. And the Exorcist, which has always been, it's always had that goofy pipe organ thing on the back.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to say it's like 5 3/4 inches tall or something like that. It is.
I was surprised how big it was.
Yeah, it is very, very tall. And the Immolator, which is a pretty inexpensive transport vehicle that has a turret mounted 12-inch 2d6 flamer, that's assault, so you can advance and still fire it without any penalty because flamers auto hit, has a giant stained glass window in the front. And I really think that not only did Games Workshop want to capture that kind of Baroque Gothic aesthetic of like, this is a church army. The army is supposed to look like you're playing the battle in the inside of a giant like 400-year-old Catholic church. But what I love about it is there are tactical downsides to the gaudiness of the models. Like, I can't hide my tanks behind things like other armies can. It's harder for me to achieve the 50% obscured to receive cover from being in a terrain feature. There is, I truly think they worked into it. It's harder to hide these ladies. because, and I really think it had something to do not just with how ostentatious they are in the setting.
Mhm.
I think it also has to do with they knew exactly what they were doing with the rules.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting take on that. Not something I had thought about before. So might actually go back and look at some of their other more recent releases and see if I can see that sort of trend there as well. Not
But
even
that would be
something I
interesting.
had given thought to.
I hadn't thought about that either, but the way the penitent engines and mortifiers stand,
Mhm.
a lot of our like the Repentia and the Archoflagellants are like splayed out really wide on their bases, like they're all baseball bat swinging their weapons, and their tendrils are all fully extended. There are very few models in the army that are standing at attention like a Space Marine.
Right.
The classic hero pose of 40K where, everybody's got their arms out 180 degrees,
Yeah.
like, that's something that happens across all armies. But if you look, like the majority of, you look at intercessors, maybe one dude's like reaching out with a knife, but the rest of them are two-hand gripping their bolter.
Yeah.
Only bolter sisters are really posed like that. Like all the close combat sisters, like the special edition limited sculpt of the Repentia Superior, her whip is in the air above her in like mid retraction, and so the model is like 2.5 inches tall.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's 3 inches tall, but their backpacks all have giant like wrought iron gate spikes all over them, and everybody is taller than they should be, wielding weapons that are swung way out at crazy angles. The vehicles are ridiculously wide and tall for for what they do, and I do really think that they were like, why hide? Like, you can cheat.
Yeah.
Why hide?
Huh. I mean, that's fair. That's a kind of a neat way to look at it. I like that. I will probably have to look at it from that lens too when I start dying to them in droves on the tabletop. So kind of on that side of things,
Sure.
I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions that are blatantly designed to tell me how to beat your sister's army. So
absolutely fine.
I know you've been kind of playing around with a pretty consistent list for a while now. I know there have been some changes to it, but you've kept the core pretty similar. So So you're dealing mostly with infantry, right?
Yeah, I found when I first started playing, I was just diehard interested in the Sacred Rose, which was a they're good at Overwatch, and they generate extra miracle dice when they use Acts of Faith and things like that. And they seemed really cool in story. But then I added a Vanguard on the side of close combat units through Bloody Rose.
Yeah.
And I really started to focus on, okay, how can I just squeeze every ounce of pain out of these Repentia sisters as possible.
Sure.
And I started looking at there's a really hard to digest character in the army. We have a funeral procession that is a single model that represents a unit of 6 elite sisters on a diorama base, which is kind of akin to some things they've done in Age of Sigmar, but it plays like a monster, but it's an infantry character. And as it degrades like a monster or a vehicle would, you remove the abilities of the various ladies in the unit who have died. And so it's essentially a whole unit on a single base that degrades. And it is just an aura factory for special rules. And when the codex came out, the community was like, it's going to look cool and it's really characterful, but like, what is it for? It's a character with 18 wounds, so you can always shoot it.
Right.
Like you can't hide it from anything. You can't screen it. And it just seemed like a giant point sink for flavorful reasons. But then as a few of us started to look at it, it became apparent that its tactical use was hidden in its aesthetic. It is designed to be literally like the pallbearers of the remains of the saint before Celestine. So if you build a funeral procession or parade around it, all of a sudden its abilities start to make a lot of sense.
Okay.
And so really, I don't know whether Games Workshop intentionally did this particular thing, if this was the outcome they planned, but it kind of ushered the Death Star back into 8th edition. Because you have this central character that's providing the buffs of like 6 characters with auras,
Right.
and you surround them with specialty troops, and you just move this colossal spearhead up the table. And when I started experimenting with that and seeing how all these units clicked and how they supported each other, is where I discovered some of the synergy with like the invuln saves and things like that you can do. But this central piece, the Triumph of St. Catherine is what it's called. This central piece really allows you to make an infantry Death Star a la like 5th, 6th, and parts of 7th edition, which I know a lot of people kind of lamented because the game turned into just nothing but my Death Star can beat your Death Star.
Yeah.
So that part of it I am a little leery of, but I do like that it really fits their aesthetic, because it is really a funeral procession, and that experimenting with that has really moved me away from like the repressor heavy mechanized, like tons of immolators, tons of repressors, which is the Forge World Transport. I moved away from like the Rhino Rush style army by like just instantly assuming, well, I'm only toughness 3, so I need to wrap everything in a Rhino.
Yeah.
And I focused on infantry.
Okay.
And that the development of what I refer to as the funeral procession TM is kind of how I moved away from Sacred Rose and kind of landed solidly in Bloody Rose.
Okay.
Because I end up basically with a really cool, really awesome looking, characterful Imperial orc army. And
I like that. Imperial orcs.
Yeah, and it's fun for me. It matches like the aggressive play style that I like, with an aesthetic and like a story that I can really like. There is this awesome kind of body horror tragedy to how the Imperium's whole everything works.
Yeah.
And I really dig getting to play like I'm playing a savage barbarian army tactically, but I get to like really kind of explore that almost like Geiger-esque grossness that is the Imperium.
Sure.
So it just makes the game more immersive and fun. So, and I know I kind of wandered around on this topic here based on your question, but I do favor infantry. If you layer the +1 invuln warlord trait and +1 invuln Celestine power over the top of each other, you can get all of those infantry in that Death Star to a 4+ invuln. So you need the protection of vehicles less.
Right.
Now, that said, there are certain variations on my list where I do put Repentia units in Rhinos, but it's less for protection and it's more for the movement benefit.
Right.
There's also, if you're playing, I'll put it this way: if you're either in a tournament or you square off against an opponent that you know is going to show you no barter, no banter, no quarter, there's some movement shenanigans you can do during deployment with a Rhino that gives you 3 inches of extra movement, and that 3 inches of extra movement in the first turn can result in a first turn charge with all of your Repentia units. And it is a super handy tactic to use, but it is a lot less fun for people who are just playing for fun.
Yeah. So
I try not to do that unless like, okay, we're rolling up our sleeves and like really going at each other in this game.
Sure.
But you can deploy the Repentia into a Rhino, deploy the Rhino at the very bleeding edge of your deployment zone, and in your first movement phase, before the Rhino moves, get out 3 inches. So you're now 3 inches plus the 28.5 millimeter base of the Repentia into no man's land. Then you do all of your move, advance, crazy rolls, charges, reroll this thing, spend stratagems, and then boom, you're 3 inches into their deployment zone on your first turn.
Right.
So that's something that you can do with Rhinos, and occasionally in competitive games I'll do that. But I do favor, I would rather just line them all up. I want you to see what's coming.
Yeah.
And so I just like lining up just mobs of infantry, and then I protect them almost as well as they would be in a Rhino with the synergy and the special rules of the Sisters.
Sure. So with a more infantry heavy army, is it fair to say you have a little bit less mobility Or do you cover that with things like Seraphim and Zephyrim? Use
I
those
do
to
try
grab
to.
objectives?
Yeah, I do try to do that. Another nice thing is I focus pretty heavily on the elites section.
Okay.
And that's another thing that we kind of borrow from Tau, is that, like, the solid core of a Tau army is really in its elites.
Sure.
And that is kind of the same thing for close combat sisters, at least. And so that frees up my troop units to be the kind of couriers, and they're the ones running around playing tag with all the objectives.
Sure.
A 5-woman sister squad costs 45 points, and you can give 2 of the sisters stormbolters for 2 points each, and you can give the superior a chain sword for free.
Right.
And if you do that, you have a 49-point unit that has 5 models that shoots like 7 and fights like 6. And so you can just fill all of your requisite troop choices up with that loadout of sisters. And they just run around the table. If you don't have a good target for your bolters and storm bolters, advance them.
Right.
But if you can, if there's something you can reach out to at 24 inches, that's, he's still 7 shots at ballistic skill 3.
Right.
And so they're just an extremely versatile, really inexpensive troop squad. And when you add in like not only the order convictions, which are like our chapter tactics, like I said earlier, but we also have an army-wide special rule called Sacred Rights. And the sacred rights are our combat doctrines. If your army is a pure sisters army, at the beginning of the game, you can either choose 1 sacred right or randomly roll 2, kind of like almost Canticles of the Omnissiah for Admech players. And that power is in effect for the whole game. And one of our stratagems allows us to roll to change it. Like if you don't need the power that you picked anymore, you can spend a command point at the start of a battle round and try to get a different one.
Sure.
But those abilities they're no joke. One of them is +1 to all charge rolls and advance rolls.
Oh, wow.
One is your entire sisters portion of the army, tanks, infantry, everything, has a 5+ shoot or fight when you die, like they're under the effects of a Space Marine Ancients flag.
Oh, wow.
One of them is +3 to their 1d6 roll to deny the witch. So now every single model in your army can deny psychic powers on a d6 +3. One of them is if you roll a 6 to wound with a shooting attack, the AP is increased by 1.
Nice.
And one of them is an unmodified 6 to hit with a melee weapon, hits twice, not generates an extra attack, hits twice. Kind of like Necron Tesla or the various rules like that, where it just hits more than 1 time. And those are on top of the unit special rules, on top of the order convictions or whatever equipment you're carrying. And so in the fact that there's only 6 different powers, and if you choose to randomly roll them, you're going to get 2 unless you roll doubles.
Right.
All of them are useful. The only one that's really that conditional is the psychic one, because if you're facing Tower Necrons, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But so in a truly competitive environment, randomness is bad. You would just choose. Like if I was entering in the tournament, I would just choose the passion, which is the melee attacks hit twice.
Okay.
Because I run a melee army.
Right.
And I cannot afford to not have it.
Yeah.
But if I'm not in there's money on the line tournament style environment, I'm always rolling.
Yeah.
Even if the game I'm playing for fun is a competitive game, I'm always rolling. Why wouldn't you want 2 powers? They're all great.
Sure. And you can always spend a command point at some point to swap them out.
Yes.
Or swap 1 out.
Yep. And so to kind of your point about board control and mobility, my troops choices are largely, they're running around, they're the ones carrying the football.
Okay.
They have that sacred right where they can get the +1 advance, +1 charge. So their maneuverability is great. There is also a handful of units in the codex that have 7 or 9 inch movement. So you Arcoflagellants, if you bring them, they compete with Repentia for your elite points, but they have a 7-inch movement instead of 6. That adds up fast.
Yep.
Death Cult Assassins have a 7-inch movement instead of 6. Penitent Engines have a 6-inch movement, and mortifiers are even faster than that. Mortifiers are the penitent engines that are piloted by sisters instead of dudes from the church.
Okay.
And so their rules are slightly different. They're more, they kind of lean more on special abilities and less on just like raw monstrous dreadnought power.
Okay.
And their movement, I believe, is 9 off the top of my head. I'd have to double check that in the codex. So yeah, I might be off by an inch there, but
sure.
But so we have tons of ways to run an infantry army or an infantry supported army with these like sort of monsters, you know, the halfway point between a dreadnought and a carnifex.
Yep.
You know, that are just tearing around the table, just hauling the mail. And then on top of that, you mentioned Seraphim. We have an elite version of Seraphim called Zephyrim now,
okay,
which are the close combat ones. And then we have the fast attack choice that is the ones that are all pistols, you know, that have the hand flamers and the Inferno pistols that people are kind of the iconic sisters unit from back in the day. So you can, depending on how you're running your detachments, you can easily have 6 units of jump pack troops. So even, you know, even not running a mechanized army,
right,
I can put ladies anywhere. It is very easy with our characters and our troop choices being as cheap as they are. It is very easy to achieve a brigade, because you're going to be filling your elites with support characters. Our headquarter choices are dirt cheap. Our sister squads, as we discussed, you know, just buy 6 of that 49 point super basic sister squad.
Right.
Then you have Seraphim to fill your fast attacks, and penitent engines and mortifiers can come in units as small as 1,
right,
and they're a heavy support choice.
Yep.
So if you're running low on points because of how you've built your brigade, you can satisfy the heavy support tax by buying your penitent engines in individuals instead of units. Yes, they're more vulnerable, but it allows you to pay that tax, and now you got 12 command points.
So I guess on the topic of command points, how many command points do you need in a list to be comfortable?
Me personally, I tend to start my list at around 14. I tend to run a double battalion and a vanguard, or double battalion and an outrider, or double battalion and a spearhead, depending on how I want to mix and match my my orders. Because I tend to, I love sacred rights, and I don't want to ally somebody in and lose them.
Right.
And so I use the versatility of the sisters' orders to almost be my own ally. And that way I don't violate my quote unquote combat doctrine.
Sure.
And so I often will I'll run like a Bloody Rose detachment, a Valorous Heart detachment, which is the one that ignores the AP. And I'll either bring in a Sacred Rose detachment for their Overwatch on 5-up, or I'll bring them in because they have a particular relic that I enjoy using. I'm also experimenting with Armored Lady. I'm kind of toying around with running them. But if I were to just kind of wipe aside how I get there, the reason why I don't like starting with less than 13, 14 command points is I usually spend 4 to 6 of them in the list build.
So things like relics and extra warlord traits.
Absolutely. The sisters have a one-time stratagem called Heroine in the Making, where you can have a second warlord trait in your army. That is limited to once per game. We have our Open the Reliquaries, which is the extra relics one, is just straight up 1 command point, unlike some of the earlier codexes in 8th edition where it was like 1 command point for 1 or 3 command points for 2. And then there was confusion on, well, how many times can you use it? And you know, our codex doesn't have that problem at all. It has a unrestricted 1 command point per relic.
It's like the revised Space Marine Codex.
Yeah, exactly. And so I tend to run 3 or 4 relics per game. I also there is a really, really good Inquisition stratagem. So the only time I stray out of the Sisters Codex is I will occasionally bring an Inquisitor.
Okay.
And Inquisitors have an ability. It's by writ of the Imperial Inquisition or something like that. But it's functionally they badge their way into the party, and they have a special rule that makes them not break purity special rules. So you can include an Inquisitor in a Space Marine army and not lose combat doctrines. You can include them in Sisters and not lose sacred rights. And there's a 1 command point stratagem for Inquisitors that gives them a warlord trait and a relic together.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so if you're using a named Inquisitor, you only get the warlord trait because they already have their own relics. But if you make your own generic Inquisitor, you can give them a warlord trait and a relic for 1 command point.
That's pretty cool.
And so I usually use that. There is also the Sisters have a way to allow the Imagifier, which is the elite character that projects the support bubble, and it comes in 3 different flavors. 1 flavor is +1 strength. 1 flavor is ignore AP -1. The 3rd flavor is reroll failed deny the witch checks. There is, for 1 command point, you can have a second. You can assign it 2 of those auras. So like say you're in a tournament, you make your list and you've got everything set up and you go to square up and your opponent is Thousand Suns. Then you have, if I recall correctly, it actually says during deployment, I'd have to double check that, but it allows you to have one of those Imagifiers have 2 songs, and you could have one of them giving one song giving the AP -1, the other song giving +1 strength, and then switch one of those to the reroll psychic tests, depending on, the event you're in, whether or not you have to do all of your command point expenditure before the tournament, or you can do it in a pre-game phase.
Right.
So it allows you to kind of almost sideboard, so to speak, based on your opponent. That's the other nice thing about sacred rights, actually, that comes to mind. Sacred rights, you actually don't select what sacred rights you're using until after deployment, but before the pre-first battle round phase. So you get to not only see who you're playing and what's in their army, but you also get to see how they deployed before you choose your sacred rights.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
That's even more flexibility.
So, there's a lot of that stuff that goes into it. And I often plan on one of my command points being spent on the reroll sacred rights. Because I roll them to get 2. And on the off chance I get one I don't need, I've already earmarked at the start of the first battle round, I spend 1 command point and toss the one I don't need for another chance at one I want.
Okay.
I tend to just build that gamble into my list.
That's a good call. Interesting. All right. So I think last question here, since we've been going for a while now, let's say I wanted to get into Sisters just starting out. Where would you recommend I kind of make the core of my army to just get started?
It is even if you don't buy all of the relics and all the character upgrades and things that I do, it is a very command point hungry army.
Okay.
Because the miracle dice, you're only using half of the benefit of the miracle dice if you're using them just for die rolls. The miracle dice also serve, like I said earlier, as almost magic points to fuel stratagems.
Right.
And so you definitely want a high amount of command points to take advantage of that. So I would say at minimum, you want to be able to achieve a double battalion, even if you don't go so far as to build a brigade. Battle sisters.
Okay.
The lovely thing about this army, and I am so happy that Games Workshop did this, and I hope this filters through to other factions. The Battle Sister squad builds the troops choice, the elite choice, the fast attack choice. And so in the 1 kit of 10 ladies, you have 1 heavy bolter, 1 heavy flamer. The only other weapon that they could have is a multi-melta, and that's in the heavy support kit, unfortunately. Okay. But in the kit, you have enough to make everybody bolters. You have enough to give you have 4 copies of every special weapon that kit, because the fast attack sisters unit can have 4 like melta gun, storm bolter, flamer. Like they can have 4 special weapons in the vernacular. And the kit provides you enough bits to have all possible combinations of those in the one kit. And so
That's nice.
when you're buying into the Sisters Army, just buy a crap ton of the Troops Choice box.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're building it, you can make all your troop choices, and then you have all the melt-a-guns you're probably ever going to need. You've got all the flamers you're ever going to need, because you're probably going to be putting Stormbolters on every troop squad. But the you just get so many options in that one box, and it makes this army so much more cost effective.
Okay.
Because say you are going to the store because all you want to do is add a Dominion squad to your army, which is the fast attack one.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to play the Space Marine Devastator game of, well, I want 4 las cannons, so I have to buy 2 boxes of Devastators so that I can get 2 las cannons in each box.
Right.
And you don't do that. You buy a box of Sisters, you give them all melt-a-guns. It is just they did a really good job of making that one kit very versatile.
That's awesome.
And you can even convert. There's enough bits in there for the Superiors, which are their unit sergeants.
Uh-huh.
There's enough bits in there that you can kind of ragtag together. Canoness is on the cheap.
Oh wow.
So if you want to start the army, figure out how you want your Canoness equipped, figure out how you're going to do your troop squads, and then buy enough boxes of the basic troop unit to get that many ladies.
Mm-hmm.
And you will probably be able to kit bash 2 battalions out of nothing but that kit.
Wow. Okay. And it's 10 to a box, right?
Yes.
So I mean, really, you could get 2 battalions out of 3 boxes of Sisters, and if you wanted the unique models, couple characters.
Yep.
And then at that point, you're just filling out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you really want to, if you really want to do it on the cheap, 3 boxes of Battle Sisters, and then 2 Canonesses. I think there's a fine cast one on their website for $25, and then the new sculpt is $35.
Mm-hmm.
So you could even get on Games Workshop's website, order 2 of the $25 fine cast one to save $10 a model.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can really get into Sisters on the cheap, and I really think that's the smart way to go, because you need those command points. The army runs on them. It's literally command points and miracle dice are the blood pumping through the Sisters veins.
Okay.
And then beyond that, the first place, in my opinion, you should go after that is an Imagifier.
Okay.
Which is the elite choice that projects the support aura.
Yep.
Because no matter how you decide to play your army, you're going to have at least one of those.
Okay.
And then Exorcists are great. Repentia are great. The Seraphim kit builds Seraphim and Zephyrim.
Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome. I really think that's where you go first. Battle Sisters, then your Canonesses or Canoness conversions, then Imagifier, and then decide, am I playing a gun line? Am I playing a hybrid army? Am I playing close combat? And that informs whether or not you're going whole hog into Repentia, Arcoflagellants, Penitent Engines, or whether you're going 3 Exorcists.
Sure.
There are Sisters players out there who believe that every Sisters army starts with a blank piece of paper and 3 Exorcists written on it.
Okay.
And I honestly, if it wasn't for my personal Exorcists being jerks, I would absolutely think that that's a viable approach, because Exorcists are really, really good.
Yeah, they're solid.
And so if you like tanks and you like super gaudy, crazy pipe organ things with like pilots that have Lady Gaga helmets on them, they're so pretty in an ugly way. They're like that. They're that like grotesquely beautiful kind of just monstrosity of an indulgence.
Yeah.
They're amazing, and they're a fun kit to put together. They're a ton of parts, but they're so gorgeous when you're done. Really easy to magnetize the 100 killer missile.
Nice.
So yeah, I would say, for what it's worth, that's where I would go. And in the order that I described a minute ago. I'm not going to repeat myself.
That's all right. That's awesome.
I've said it like 4 times. I don't want to bore people, but but yeah, I mean, but a big thing is decide how you want to run them. If you want to go the collection approach, get them all. They're all gorgeous, and that way you can do whatever you want, change it up, paint them as a unique order, and change what order you're running every game. If you're not going to tournaments where everything's got to be locked down and obvious who is what, and it's got to be fully painted, whatever, like just grab everything and throw it together. They're a fun army. If you want to play competitively, you want to stay on the bleeding edge of it, you're probably going to want to stick to Exorcist and Repentia, in my personal opinion. But But yeah, I mean they're great. Just battle sisters, battle sisters, battle sisters. You can never have enough storm bolters.
Okay.
You are going to. It's only 2 points to double that girl's output, man.
Yeah.
It's so good. Oh God. And there's a stratagem, 1 command point turns them into AP2 or AP -2 damage.
Oof.
And if you're a member of Sacred Rose, there's 1 command point for 6s explode like Daka 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 from the orcs.
Oh wow.
So you can have a squad of 4 storm bolters for 2 command points putting out at rapid fire range, putting out God, what is that? 16 shots that explode on 6s that are AP -2 damage with a 3-up ballistic skill. It's only 45 points to park a character next to him that gives them reroll 1s. Like, it's crazy. Storm bolters are just so good, and there's 4 of them at every battle sister box, man. Like, just every time you leave a friendly local game store or a Games Workshop store or the Games Workshop website, there should be one of those in your bag.
Nice.
Like, just until you have sisters literally coming out of your nose while you're sleeping. Battle sisters, battle sisters, battle sisters.
Okay. All right. Well, I think on that note, then, I know I'm looking forward to seeing them on the tabletop again and being able to get some games in against them. But I think we can wrap it up here. Appreciate you giving us the breakdown and kind of talking through and answering some of my questions. And hopefully some of our listeners here will have an idea of kind of what the Sisters Army looks like, and maybe have either gotten some tips on ways they could try things out with their Sisters Army, or maybe got some inspiration to start collecting a new faction. So anything you want to say to wrap up here?
Well, yeah, I just want to thank you for the time, and yeah, I always enjoy talking about sisters, man. But I also will throw out, in general, in 40K, a very firm belief I hold, whether you're playing just for fun or you're playing competitively, is the game is about making your opponent make meaningful choices.
Yeah,
you're trying to put your opponent on their back foot, and the sisters, if done right, are really good at that. And they have so many viable distraction carnifexes. And if you don't know that kind of like gamer term, I'm sure you can find it on anywhere, 1D4chan, whatever. Distraction carnifex, man. Yep. The sisters are so good at that. And you can really, really utilize that to put your opponent in some really no-win situations. Nice. And I say this to bring up, you want to have more of a discussion about this, you can hit us up on Discord. You can start a conversation with us on our Facebook page. I will talk about sisters as much as you'll let me. So if you have any questions about things I talked about today, or you want to dive deeper into what I mean by distraction carnifexes, hit us up, and I will spend hours proselytizing and trying to bring you over to the throne.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and thanks everybody for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Yeah, see y'all. Be safe.